Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Zach's Credit Card Guide. Sorry I've been off the radar for a couple weeks. It's been time for finals at university and I've been super busy, so I apologize guys, but we're jumping right back into it and we're going to give you an update on what's going on in the credit card space right now. This week's topic is we're going to talk about why everybody should take a break from applying for new cards right now just because of the crisis and everything else. The banks are getting really skittish and right now you really want to keep your credit report and your profile and everything as clean as possible. Now there was a survey that came out in late April that was talking about there have been a lot of people who have seen their credit limits lowered involuntarily, and even some accounts are getting canceled outright. And that's because banks have learned from situations like this in the past where people can't necessarily pay their bills, so they need to scramble and lower their risk because they can't have people charging up a bunch of money that they're never going to be able to pay back. So what they do is behind the scenes, they go through and look at accounts, and I'm not sure what metrics they're using or what criteria, but they are designating some accounts as being higher risk and are either lowering their limits or closing them entirely. So that's why I say the biggest piece of advice I would have right now that I'm taking myself is to not apply for any new cards. Basically, don't do anything that makes your profile look like any sort of a risk at all. So pay off your balances. That's one of the golden rules that we talk about on this channel, is pay off your balances every month in full. Now, I realize that some people's financial situation is a little rocky right now. I get it, but if you can at all help it, pay off your balances in full every month. That's one of the biggest things to make you look like less of a risk, is that you're living within your means. That's what it looks like when you charge up a little bit of a balance and then you pay it off consistently. That makes you look less risky, and that's the biggest piece of advice that I would have. Also, if you are going to carry a balance, try to keep your utilization under 30%. That's where it starts to hurt your credit score. I like to keep it under 10% even, just to have a nice buffer, but 30% is where it really starts to tank your credit score, which is why it's even more important to check all of your accounts right now and see if you were affected. The survey said it was 50 million Americans, so that's about 1 in 4 that have a credit card. So there's a moderately high chance that this happened to one of your accounts. So go through and see if your limits were lowered. If it was, then you'll just have to decide if that's a big deal or not. I wouldn't really recommend calling the bank because that's a decision that was recently made on your account and it's unlikely that they'll reverse it. So what you could do is you could try and call and ask and see what happens. But if that lowering puts you above 30%, where now your credit score is taking a bit of a hit, you could consider applying for a different card if you needed to get your utilization back down. That would be one benefit to doing that, but a lot of banks are tightening their approval criteria and you may find it harder to get approved for a new card too, because again, they're kind of skittish about their risk right now. And if your profile says that you have moderately high utilization, they're going to wonder why you're applying for more credit. They're going to think that you're in a crunch and you're trying to find somewhere to spend money. So I guess what I would advise is, if it's at all possible, if it's an option, don't apply for new cards right now. It's just going to make you look more risky. It's not really worth it, I don't think. Even if your utilization is a little bit above 30, I just really don't think it's worth it right now, because think about it, right now we're kind of in a boat in choppy water, right? Yeah, maybe you're taking on a little bit of water. I don't know where this analogy is going, but basically just ride out the storm. You can fix your credit score when this is all done and the banks settle down a little bit and they start approving people again. So that's what I would recommend, is just take it easy. So unless there's a super good sign-up bonus or a card you have to have right now for some weird reason, just hold off. The cards aren't going anywhere and all of this is going to settle down, I would hope, in a few months. So I would recommend just taking it easy, but first log on to all of your accounts, especially ones that you don't necessarily use all the time, because that's one of the things that the banks look for, is dormant accounts. If they're going to start chopping their risk, those accounts they're not making money on, so that's where they're going to start chopping first. So like, I have a couple cards at some banks that I just never touch. I leave them open because they help my credit report the longer they're open, but I don't really use them. So what I would recommend is dust those off every once in a while. Normally I recommend about once a quarter to use all of your cards, at least once. Take them to go fill up your car or something like that. But right now, just run them every once in a while, put it on your Amazon account and just refill your gift card balance or something like that. So just use your cards even a little bit just to show some activity. And before we move move on. One of the weird things about this credit limit lowering thing, you may be thinking, well, I didn't hear anything, I'm probably not affected. The banks actually don't have to tell you except in very specific circumstances. So the only times that the issuers have to tell you about something, about a change like this, is if you might incur a fee. So if by lowering your limit, it would put you over your limit and now you would incur all sorts of penalties and everything, then they have to tell you and they have to give you 45 days heads up. But if that wouldn't be the case, if just lowering your limit went from like 10 grand to 8 grand and you only have like $1,000 on there, they don't have to tell you. You just log into your account and you see it. So as far as that story goes, I would recommend just checking your accounts just so you know. You should be checking your accounts pretty regularly anyway, but just log onto your accounts and see if your limits were lowered. And if so, I would really recommend just sucking it up and dealing with it if you can. But if it's really going to put you in a jam, then call the banks and see what options you might have. So our next story is from Chase. As a lot of you know who have these Chase cards, they have partnered up with DoorDash to really bring some enhanced benefits to some of their cards, even the no annual fee ones like the Freedom and Freedom Unlimited. So for the rest of this month, for May, you can get 5 times UR points with DoorDash. Now this is only up to $500 in spend, so if you max that out, 2,500 points, which isn't a whole bunch. I mean, that's only worth about 50 bucks. But right now, if you're using DoorDash anyway, like maybe you're using your DoorDash credit on the Sapphire Reserve, you can get 5 times points on DoorDash. So that's only till the end of May, and again, it's only up to $500 in spend. So not the most valuable benefit, but something to be aware of that it is out there. So our last story this week is we're going to talk about a move that Frontier Airlines almost made in response to the pandemic. So a lot of airlines have stopped booking middle seats, the dreaded middle seat. A lot of airlines are just not booking those. So if you do have to fly for whatever reason right now, you may notice that on your flight, all the middle seats are empty, and that's pretty much all of the major airlines across the board. Now, Frontier Airlines, which if you've never had the pleasure, is one of these low-cost airlines here in the States, kind of like Spirit, that is like the ticket is your butt in a seat and that's it, and they nickel and dime you for everything else. Now, a lot of these low-cost carriers get hate for that, but when you think about it, the other name brand carriers do this already with their basic economy tickets. It's the exact same model. So I don't get why these low-cost carriers get a lot of the hate, especially because like Spirit Airlines recently had the most on-time departures among all the airlines. But anyway, going off on a tangent, Frontier Airlines. So their response to this whole middle seat thing was they were going to start charging people between $39 and $89 for an extra room fee. Basically, these low-cost airlines really ride the razor's edge of profitability, and they're one of the first ones to get hurt right now. So they were going to start charging people basically a surcharge, basically raising the ticket prices for everybody else to make up for that lost revenue. Some of these other airlines have just been absorbing that, and they're trying to get by the best they can. But these other airlines that, again, are barely profitable in good times, they can't really absorb that, so they had to try to raise the fees. Now, they've since rescinded that pretty much right away. They responded to public outcry from the marketplace that was saying that they were trying to profiteer from everything that's going on right now. So they quickly said they weren't going to do it. So I'm sure they're trying to find other ways to save costs or increase revenue. But it does bring us to kind of an interesting thought that depending on how all of this goes, I'm sure that ticket prices for the airlines are going to have to start creeping up to make up for this lost revenue, because airlines try to fly at the highest capacity they can to make sure that they're profitable. So I'm sure that a lot of these flights right now that all these airlines have booked at like 75% capacity or whatever they're doing are barely making them money, if anything at all. So I'm sure that we're going to see ticket prices start to creep up as supply and demand will allow to make up for the lost revenue of not flying full. So it'll be a very interesting time in this travel space for probably the next year or so. Even if this whole virus thing gets figured out in the next few months, I'm sure that these ripple effects are going to be felt for several months after that, maybe even up to a year. So it really puts a wrench into our whole travel hobby. I think what we'll talk about next week is what to do with your points in the meantime. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sitting on a mountain of points in all sorts of different little places. I've got a pretty healthy balance with my Chase UR points. I've got some balances with specific like airline programs, Marriott points. Like I've got plans, you know what I mean? Kind of like you guys. Like I had all these trips kind of planned out in my head where we're gonna go, we're gonna do all this. We got the companion pass, we're gonna go on all these little trips. So I've got points like squirreled away everywhere. I can't use them right now. And I think it'll just be sit on them. Is kind of what I'm gonna do, because I'm not gonna cash them out. Like Chase UR points, you could just cash out. I don't think I'm gonna do that. I mean, you could, like if you're in a real crunch and you've got like 200,000 Chase points sitting there, you could cash them out, but I don't know what I'm gonna do with those. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. I am thinking about having some guests on the episodes here. If we can figure out a way to do like a FaceTime interview and get you guys recorded, I would like to do some of that stuff and get kind of a two-way conversation going about some of these topics. So maybe we'll start that next week. So if you are interested in being in that video, I think what we'll talk about is maybe your experience with the pandemic. I'd really like to hear from anybody who has had their limits lowered on their accounts. If that happened to you, please get in touch. My social media links are down below. So I would like to have some guests on for maybe next week to talk about if that's happened to you, but maybe we'll just talk about like general credit card stuff. It kind of depends on who reaches out. So if you are interested in being in an episode, please reach out in the link down below. That's all we've got for you this week, guys. My question for you guys is, were your credit limits lowered? Let everybody know down in the comments. What has been your experience? Did you do anything about it? Did you call the bank? Anything like that? Let everybody know down below. And before we go, guys, please consider leaving the video a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. Pretty easy and free ways to help support the channel. That's all I've got for you this time, guys. See you at the next one. Hey, thanks for watching. Make sure to drop a comment down below and give the video a thumbs up. Here's some other videos that I think you'll really like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos, and I'm on Facebook and Twitter as well. See you at the next one.